Could a temple, built for the one true God, really have been raised by powers that God himself once called unclean? And why do the symbols found on Solomon's seal appear in Mesopotamia centuries before his birth? A legend is never born in silence. It erupts from the roar of the impossible. It begins with a young king, Solomon, son of David, entrusted with a mission beyond human strength, to build a house for the Lord, an undertaking no man could accomplish. Architects stood helpless, treasurers despaired. Stones of unimaginable size had to be quarried, transported intact, and carved with perfect precision. And all of it in silence, without hammer or chisel. An impossible task. But one night, in desperation, Solomon prayed. And the answer came, not in a dream, not in a wise counsel. A burst of light filled the night. Before him stood Archangel Michael, and in his hand was no sword, but a small ring. Nothing extraordinary at first glance. Yet within it lay the beginning of a mystery. Gold and iron fused together into a simple seal, two interlocked triangles, a hexagram. Yet from it radiated a power so fierce it made the air itself tremble. With this ring, declared the messenger, you will command every spirit of earth, air, and water. They will serve you and obey your every command. A gift, or perhaps the most cunning trap in human history. Solomon accepted it, and the world was never the same. His first test came swiftly. Orneas, the demon tormenting Solomon's beloved servant. Following the instructions, the king hurled the ring at the shadow. The invisible terror screamed with an unearthly cry, collapsed at Solomon's feet, and was bound by unseen chains. This was the first victory. Solomon tasted the intoxicating sweetness of absolute power. He had not merely defeated, he had enslaved. The demon was forced to his knees, and the interrogation began. That interrogation became the pattern for thousands more. Orneas, trembling under the seal's might, revealed the names of other spirits, their powers, and their weaknesses. Solomon had gained keys, not just one, but a whole ring of keys to the darkest prison in the universe. The temple's construction began, but it was no mere building project, it was a war. A ceaseless, spiritual war. Solomon stood on the hill and only pointed, and the impossible unfolded. Giant stones ripped themselves from the cliffs, rose into the air, and flew silently to Jerusalem. They landed with precision beyond any craftsman, without a single blow, without a sound. Only the voiceless cries of enslaved spirits broke the silence, cries heard by Solomon alone. One by one he summoned them, Beelzebub, Prince of Darkness. Biletos, the cruel demon of war. Asmodeus, the spirit of rage and destruction. Each one he marked with the seal. Each one he bent to his will. They drew gold from the deepest veins of the earth, fetched rare timbers from distant forests, and delivered them in an instant. They lifted water from barren wells and revealed the secrets of metals. Kings build their walls of stone, but Solomon built his with the fear of demons. Yet every fear has an expiration date. The greatest trial came with Asmodeus, king of the jinn. He did not simply submit, he mocked. He tested Solomon's will, offering knowledge that could drive a man to madness. He hinted, the ring was no divine gift, but merely a tool, and true power belonged to those who stood behind it. Solomon endured. He forced even Asmodeus to knead clay and weave ropes. But in the demon's eyes, he saw no fear, only a promise. A promise of revenge. Each day of building was a battle. The king lost sleep. He saw them. He heard their thoughts. They whispered to him of the structure of the cosmos, of the future, of hidden treasures. And with each revelation, his soul grew colder. He received answers to questions no mortal should ask. He discovered what God had hidden from Adam, and that omnipotence was more terrifying than weakness itself. The temple rose, radiant, magnificent, a wonder of the world. But its foundation was not only stone. It was pain, hatred, and the thirst for vengeance of countless enslaved spirits. A foundation strong, yet fragile, like frozen lava. Solomon prevailed. He built the temple. But as he gazed upon its blinding splendor, for the first time he wondered, had he himself become a slave of the small ring on his finger? And which is more dreadful, the power over the world, or the knowledge that you cannot hold it? From the very beginning, the story of the ring was forked like a serpent's tongue. Some texts claim it was brought by an archangel. Other, far more ancient sources, whisper of a pact with powers that existed long before humanity. So decide for yourself, from whose hands did Solomon receive this gift? And write in the comments which version you believe. The code word is archangel if you trust in divine intervention, or contract if you suspect there was fine print attached. The temple was finished. Its brilliance blinded the eyes. Its beauty silenced even the proudest kings. Yet Solomon's true treasures were not hidden in golden chests, but in his memory and the texts he began to write. Thus was born the Testament of Solomon, one of the most mysterious and dangerous documents in human history. It was not a religious treatise. It was a manual, a field guide to mastering the invisible world, a record of interrogations of 72 demons, princes of darkness, with detailed accounts of their powers, functions, and weaknesses. Solomon was not the first to receive such knowledge, but he was the first to systematize it. Jewish mystical tradition speaks of the book of the angel Raziel, wisdom given by God to Adam after Eden, so he might regain a portion of lost knowledge. That book contained secrets of creation, astrology, even the very language of angels. It was said to be so sacred and so dangerous that when cast into fire, it would not burn. Solomon, with access to the most ancient writings, likely did not just inherit a gift. He revived and expanded an ancient technology of communication with the unseen realm, turning revelation into a weapon of command. His throne room became a laboratory. He summoned spirits again, one after another. But this time not for building, for knowledge. He asked the demon that spreads disease, "How can it be cured?" Bound by the seal, the spirit revealed the secrets of herbs and minerals, laying the foundation for future medicine. He interrogated the spirits of the air about the motion of stars and planets, and they drew for him celestial maps with a precision that mankind would not achieve for thousands of years. But knowledge not paid for in sweat is always paid for in soul. The spirits that governed the earth's depths pointed him to veins of gold, silver, and copper. The legendary mines of Solomon were no myth. They were a business project carried out through supernatural geological scanning. He did not search for treasures, he already knew where they lay. His wealth multiplied at astonishing speed. Israel became a superpower, not through conquest, but through technological supremacy gifted by the ring. Yet every new secret came with a price. The king who spoke with spirits began to lose his bond with men. His wisdom grew cold and cruel. He saw the hidden motives of everyone who came near. In their hearts he read envy, fear, greed. This knowledge killed trust. He surrounded himself with spies, but his greatest spies were not men. They were spirits, slipping through walls and reading thoughts. Solomon became a paranoid ruler, trapped inside the golden cage of his own omnipotence. His famous judgments, like the one where he commanded the child be split, were less wisdom than cruel experiments, psychological tests suggested by those who knew every lever of the human soul. He viewed the world as a vast mechanism, and people as its gears to be manipulated. The testament grew thicker, filled with formulas to summon storms, halt rivers, or find anything lost. But it also carried warnings. For demons, even in chains, remained liars. They revealed part of the truth only to conceal another, one far more dangerous. They gave him knowledge, but never the wisdom to use it. Solomon understood this. He tried to build a system of defense. For every demon he found a countering angel, for every curse a prayer. He turned chaos into science, classified powers, forged a hierarchy of hell itself. It was a titanic intellectual feat, but in his pursuit of control, he missed the greatest truth. It was not the demons he needed to master, it was himself. His pride grew with the temple. He ceased to be God's servant wielding a tool. He began to see himself as equal to him. Not merely a king, but a demiurge, commanding the forces of creation. And within that pride lay a ticking time bomb. News of his wealth and unmatched wisdom spread across the world. Merchant caravans carried stories of Jerusalem's wonders. The cedar palace, the golden vessels, the king who spoke the language of birds and beasts. These tales reached the farthest lands, sparking envy and curiosity. But one ruler heard in them not just wealth, but power. The mysterious and mighty Queen of the South. She longed to see the source of this power with her own eyes. Her caravan moved through the desert like a golden river. Hundreds of camels laden with spices, precious stones, and fabrics unseen before. At its head rode the Queen of Sheba herself, ruler of a kingdom that controlled the trade routes of Arabia and Africa. The official story spoke of her desire to hear Solomon's wisdom. But that was a mask. Her journey was no romantic tale. It was the first mission of industrial espionage in history. Her goal was not alliance, but technology. The technology of absolute power, bound within a small ring. The Queen of Sheba, known in Ethiopian legends as Makeda and in Islamic tradition as Bilqis, was not just a beauty. She was the most brilliant woman of her age. Her kingdom thrived on trade and diplomacy, but she knew, before Solomon's power, her wealth was nothing. She brought not only gifts but also her finest sages, spies, and analysts. The riddles she posed to Solomon were no playful puzzles. They were deliberate tests, crafted to break his system and expose its flaws. She asked him how to tell real flowers from artificial without touching them. Solomon smiled and ordered the windows opened. The bees flew straight to the living blooms. Not just an answer, a statement. I command not only men, but nature itself. She brought boys and girls dressed identically, asking him to tell who was who. Solomon commanded them to wash. The boys did it swiftly in one motion. The girls carefully, as they had been taught. Again, a statement. I know the hidden laws of human nature. Every riddle was a provocation, every response a counterstrike. It was a duel between two of the greatest minds of the age. The queen sought to discover whether his power came from divine providence, pure intellect, or something else entirely. And Solomon, drunk on his own greatness, made a fatal mistake. He decided to astonish her once and for all. When she arrived in Jerusalem, her throne, left hundreds of miles away in her capital, was already waiting in Solomon's palace. It had been transported instantly by spirits. At that moment, the game was over. The queen understood. The source of his power was neither God nor reason. It was the third force her priests had whispered about. A power that could be mastered, controlled. And she desired that secret. The following days of her visit turned into a carefully orchestrated operation. While her servants entertained the court, her spies searched for the truth, trying to infiltrate the temple's secrets, bribe whispers, and uncover any record tied to the ring. But she encountered a flawless system of security. Solomon used his invisible guardians as counter-spies. Every step her people took was known to him. Every whispered word was overheard. He knew her intentions and played his own game. He showed her wealth, armies, fleets, but all of it was a facade. Behind it he hid his greatest asset, the ring. The story of their love, told in many texts, was most likely part of that game. Could a king who read the darkest thoughts of every heart truly fall in love? Could he trust a woman who came to steal his power? Their bond was perhaps nothing more than another battlefield, where the weapons were flattery and temptation. The queen left with nothing. She gained neither the ring nor its secret. Yet she carried away something more dangerous. The certainty that such a technology existed. The idea of commanding spirits left Israel and began its journey through the world. Seeds of future wars, quests, and disasters were sown. Solomon won the duel, but the victory only fed his pride. He had repelled the first external strike against his secret. He proved he could outwit the shrewdest of enemies. But he forgot, the deadliest enemy always lies within. His pride, swollen by triumph, reached its breaking point. And the one who waited for this moment, kneading clay on the temple's construction site, was Asmodeus. That visit was glorious, but perilous. And even now, the question lingers. Was the queen driven by genuine admiration, or by cold calculation? Who was she really, a curious monarch, or history's first raider attempting a hostile takeover? Write in the comments what you think she sought. Code word wisdom, if you believe in her sincerity, or technology, if you think it was all about the secret of the ring. Pride is rust. It corrodes even the strongest armor. Solomon's armor was forged from divine grace and absolute power. But the rust had already begun to eat through it. After the departure of the Queen of Sheba, he felt untouchable. He had defeated every enemy, both seen and unseen. He sat upon the summit of the world and believed it would last forever. And so he made his final, fatal mistake. Dominion over spirits was not enough. Knowledge of treasures and secrets was not enough. He wanted to know everything. The greatest mystery, the one God himself had hidden even from the angels. He summoned Asmodeus, not to labor, but to speak. The king sat upon his throne, idly turning the ring. And Asmodeus, towering and dreadful, stood before him, still bound by the seal. Yet in his eyes there was no submission, only mockery. "You are mighty, O king," thundered the demon. "But there are truths even you do not know. I can show them to you. But you must release me from my chains, and give me your ring, only for a moment. Then I will reveal to you the secret of creation, and the end of all things." Solomon hesitated. He knew the law. Never remove the ring in the presence of a demon. But the hunger for knowledge clouded his judgment. "What could you show me that I have not already seen?" he asked. "I will show you how the world was made, and how it will be destroyed," Asmodeus replied. And Solomon yielded. He slipped the ring from his finger. In that instant everything changed. Asmodeus grew monstrous, one wing touching the sky, the other the earth. He tore the ring from the king's hand, and his roar shook Jerusalem. But he did not kill Solomon. That would have been too simple. He did something far worse. He lifted the king like a doll and hurled him 400 miles from the palace. Then he took Solomon's form. The same gait, the same voice, the same wise smile. But the eyes were empty and cold. He cast the ring into the sea, not to lose it, but to ensure none but he could ever reclaim it. And Asmodeus sat upon the throne of Israel. An era of terror began, cloaked in the disguise of wisdom. The false Solomon issued insane, merciless laws, and no one dared oppose them, for they came from the mouth of the wisest of kings. He defiled the temple with pagan rites. He dissolved his harem into debauchery. The nation sank into darkness, yet the people thought only this: their great king had simply lost his mind to pride. And the real Solomon? He wandered the desert in rags, without food or water. No one recognized him. When he claimed he was king, they laughed in his face and threw stones. The wisest ruler, builder of the temple, master of spirits, reduced to a beggar and a madman. Thus began his long years of exile. But this was not mere punishment. It was the only path to saving his soul. The man who had never known hunger now begged for bread. The one who commanded legions now labored at the lowest tasks. He lost everything: his kingdom, his honor, even his name. And only in losing all, he began to find himself. He saw the truth. His wisdom had been nothing more than information stolen from demons. His wealth had been plundered from the earth by enslaved spirits. His power had rested on fear. It was all an illusion. And illusions always collapse, leaving only pain and shame. The loss of the ring was not just his downfall. It was a disaster for the entire world. The artifact that upheld the fragile balance was gone. The demons he had bound felt the weakness of their jailer. The world began its slow descent into chaos. And all of it because of one moment of pride. Could you trust the greatest secret to even one person, knowing it would destroy them? Solomon did not trust. He simply failed. And that failure cost him the world. He wandered for 3 years. In that time, he journeyed from king to slave, and back again, but only within himself. Solomon, cast out and humiliated, worked in the kitchen of an Ammonite king, tended horses, and labored on construction sites. His face had been marked by sorrow, his hands hardened by toil. He spoke little, silently atoning for his pride. He no longer tried to prove who he was. He simply lived, day by day, accepting his fate. It was a path of purification. He recalled the words once spoken to him: "All things pass." And now he understood their true meaning. Not only joy and glory fade, but also pain and humiliation. One day, after receiving a few coins for his work, he went to the market to buy a fish. He was hungry, but his soul was at peace. Quiet surrender had replaced despair. Back in his hut, as he gutted the fish, something flashed inside. His heart froze. It was the ring, cast into the sea by Asmodeus, swallowed by a fish, drawn from the waters, and sold by chance into the hands of the very one who had lost it. A moment of truth. Solomon slid it onto his finger, and nothing happened. No burst of light, no trembling of the earth. The power returned, but it was different now. It did not intoxicate or tempt. It had become part of him, governed not by pride, but by humility. He returned to Jerusalem not as a conqueror, but as a pilgrim. In his palace, he saw his double, Asmodeus, still performing his bloody masquerade upon the throne. The guards tried to bar the beggar, but he raised his hand with the ring. An unseen force hurled them aside. He entered the throne room. Asmodeus roared with fury at the sight of him. The demon lunged, revealing his monstrous form. Yet Solomon stood calm. This was no battle of magic. It was a duel of spirit. He uttered no incantations. He simply looked into the demon's eyes. And in his gaze there was no power, only wisdom, forged in suffering. He spoke but a single word: the name of God. And the ring's power, fused with the strength of his purified soul, acted as never before. Asmodeus was seized, crushed, and bound. Yet this time Solomon did not merely enslave him. He banished him to the desert, sealed in stone until the end of time. The king returned to his throne, but he was no longer the same man. He abolished the cruel laws of the false Solomon, cleansed the temple, and sought forgiveness from his people. He ruled for many more years, and those years were marked by true wisdom and prosperity. He used the ring, but rarely and with great caution. For he had learned its secret. The ring was not evil. It only magnified what was already within the soul: pride or humility, greed or generosity. Solomon died in deep old age, leaving behind a majestic legacy. But what became of the ring? That remains the greatest mystery. Some legends claim it was buried with him in a secret tomb beneath the temple. Others say it was entrusted to a hidden order. Still others insist he cast it back into the sea, knowing mankind was not ready for such power. Whatever the case, the object vanished. But the idea remained. The idea of a key to absolute power. And that idea became a time bomb, laid in the foundation of future civilizations. The legend of the ring's return is the story of a miracle. But what made it possible? Blind chance? That a fish swallowed the ring and was placed on his table? Or the inner transformation that made him worthy of it? You decide. Write your code word in the comments. Luck, if you believe in chance. Or repentance, if you believe he earned a second chance. The death of Solomon was the beginning of the end. His wisdom and his power, embodied in the ring, had been the glue holding Israel together. With his passing, the kingdom cracked and split in two. Civil strife erupted. Brother fought brother. Idolatry spread like fire. The Golden Age gave way to an age of decline. Enemies who once trembled at the very name of Solomon now waited for the right moment to strike. And in 586 BC, that moment came. The Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar II, marched to the walls of Jerusalem. This was no ordinary conquest. It was a carefully orchestrated operation. The Babylonians sought not merely to plunder the city. Their true target was the temple. And they sought not gold or silver, though they seized plenty. What they wanted was Solomon's legacy, his knowledge, his technology. Babylonian priests and magi, heirs of the ancient Sumerian cults, had long known the legends of the ring. They had heard of its power, and they desired it. The army besieged the city, then broke through. Jerusalem burned. Soldiers looted homes and slaughtered its people. But the elite squads, masked priests and scholars, moved directly to the Temple Mount. They took no part in the carnage. Their mission was different. They set fire to the great Temple of Solomon, burning it to ashes. Yet the flames were only a smokescreen for their true purpose. Beneath the ruins, amid smoke and chaos, they dug. They searched for hidden vaults, underground libraries, the very tomb of Solomon himself. They searched for grimoires, instructions, blueprints. And above all, the ring. Did they find it? History is silent. Most likely, no. But they uncovered something else. Fragments of knowledge, copies of Solomon's testament made by his disciples, texts describing the summoning and binding of spirits. The Babylonians carried away not only treasures, but minds. The wisest scribes, priests, and prophets of Israel were taken, not as slaves, but as priceless vessels of knowledge. And there, in the shadow of the mighty ziggurat, a new chapter of the ring's history began. Babylonian magi, with stolen scrolls in hand, made desperate attempts to reconstruct Solomon's technology, blending it with their own, darker practices. It was like trying to assemble a nuclear reactor from burned scraps of blueprints. The results were catastrophic. Babylon became a melting pot of magic. Jewish mysticism, centered on the one God and the hierarchy of angels, collided with Mesopotamian demonology, far older, bloodier, and chaotic. The names from Solomon's testament became entangled with those of Sumerian and Akkadian demons like Pazuzu and Lamashtu. Kabbalistic astrology fused with Babylonian astronomy, spawning new hybrid forms of divination. Here, in this forced synthesis, Solomon's knowledge was twisted, transformed from an instrument of control into a weapon of chaos. They unleashed forces they could not control. Dangerous cults emerged, spreading across the empire. Grimoires based on corrupted fragments of Solomon's wisdom began their bloody march through history. The loss of the ring once exiled a king. The destruction of the temple and the theft of its secrets exiled an entire nation, and unleashed an idea that spread like wildfire. The fire of Jerusalem destroyed a building, but it released a genie of knowledge that could never be forced back into the bottle. That idea became a virus, mutating, adapting, waiting for new hosts. The Babylonian captivity ended. The Jews returned and built the second temple. But it was only a shadow of the first, for the great secret was gone. It had dissolved into the ashes, scattered across the world with the exiled sages. Only fragments remained, and the eternal question: what if Nebuchadnezzar had found not just the texts, but the ring itself? 5 centuries passed. Judea, still scarred from Babylon's destruction, now bent under the heel of a new, even greater empire. The Roman eagle spread its iron wings across the Mediterranean. And into this new reality stepped one of history's bloodiest, most ambitious tyrants, Herod the Great. He was no Jew by birth. He was an Idumean. But Rome made him king of Judea. And to win the loyalty of his people, Herod launched a project of staggering audacity, the rebuilding of the Second Temple. He sought to surpass even Solomon himself. Yet his motives were not purely political. Herod was obsessed with the figure of the legendary king. He saw in him not a sage, but the model of an absolute ruler, commanding not only men, but invisible powers as well. He believed that the secret of such authority was still buried somewhere beneath the Temple Mount. Under the cover of this monumental construction, Herod initiated secret excavations. He employed Roman engineers to tunnel deep beneath the foundations of the sanctuary. The priests of Jerusalem were horrified, accusing him of defiling the holiest place. But no one could stop a king backed by Rome. What was he searching for? The tomb of Solomon. The ring. It was during this tense period that the first written versions of the Testament of Solomon began to circulate in the Jewish underground. Texts once passed down orally were now recorded in Greek, the international language of the age. It was a dangerous manuscript. It listed in detail the names of demons and the methods of binding them. For some, it was a sacred relic. For others, a manual of black magic. And inevitably, such a text could not escape the attention of the most efficient intelligence service of the ancient world, Roman espionage. When the first copies fell into the hands of agents in Alexandria and Antioch, alarms were raised. The Romans might not have believed in demons, but they believed in the power of ideas. And what they saw was not mere heresy. They saw technology. Technology to create a superweapon, to rally fanatics, to incite uprisings, and to challenge even the emperor himself. The threat was so real that it fell under one of Rome's harshest laws, Lex Cornelia de Sicarius et Veneficis. This statute, passed in the days of Sulla the dictator, punished not only poisoning and assassination with death, but also the crime of sorcery, maleficium. For Roman justice, there was no distinction between slipping poison into a cup and striking at the emperor with an incantation. The spread of grimoires promising mastery over spirits was treated as high treason. What if some rebellious prophet in Galilee or Syria, using these instructions, truly managed to perform wonders and lead a crowd? For an empire built on the legion's strength and the cult of the emperor, this was an existential threat. A merciless hunt began, not for demons, but for books and their keepers. Roman agents raided secret gatherings, interrogated scribes, and confiscated scrolls. Many were executed not for their faith, but on charges of magic, a crime punishable by death. The world entered a new age of paranoia. Herod dug beneath the earth for the artifact. The Romans hunted above the surface for knowledge. And the Testament itself lived on, copied, translated, spreading like a virus across the empire. Herod never found the ring. His magnificent temple was destroyed by Rome in 70 AD. Jerusalem once again ran red with blood. The Temple Mount lay in ruins. It seemed the story had ended. But it had not. The physical center was gone, yet the idea of the ring, its immaterial legacy, was already scattered across the world. The ruins of the temple became a symbol of lost glory, a magnet drawing seekers for centuries. And 1,000 years later, some came closer to the truth than anyone before. Herod's world was brutal, but simple, a tyrant, an empire, gold. But what is more dangerous to the stability of the world? Visible power, or secret knowledge spreading in silence? Reflect and decide. Write in the comments, Herod, if you believe his armies and madness were the greater threat. Or reader, if you think one man with a forbidden book could unleash even greater ruin. On the ashes of the world Rome had left behind, a new civilization arose, united under Christ. Jerusalem became a center of pilgrimage for Christians. But the Temple Mount, the place where Solomon's temple once stood, and where now the Dome of the Rock rose, remained an unhealed wound, a source of conflict and secrets. And at the end of the 10th century, Europe erupted with religious fervor. The Crusades began. Knights from across Europe marched east to wrest the Holy Land from the Muslims. The official goal, the Holy Sepulchre. But as always, behind the official version lay another. After the capture of Jerusalem in 1099, a strange event took place. In 1119, 9 French knights led by Hugues de Payens founded a new order. Its full name, the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The Templars. They claimed their mission was to protect pilgrims along the roads of the Holy Land. Strange though, for such a grand mission, they numbered only 9. Stranger still, the King of Jerusalem, Baldwin II, granted them an entire wing of his palace, built directly over the ruins of Solomon's temple. For the next 9 years, these knights were rarely seen on the roads. By day they prayed and trained. By night, by torchlight, they dug. They explored tunnels from the days of Herod, descended into cisterns, and searched for hidden passages described in ancient texts. What were they seeking? The Holy Grail? So say the legends. But their very name revealed the truth. Their target was Solomon's temple. They sought his legacy, knowledge, grimoires, treasure. They sought the ring. Yet in this land of intrigue, the Templars were not the only secret force. In the mountains of Syria and Persia, another shadowy order was rising in power. The Nizarites. The world came to know them by another name. The Assassins. Their leader, Hassan ibn Sabah, known as the Old Man of the Mountain, wielded esoteric knowledge, psychological mastery, and the absolute loyalty of his followers to forge a state without territory. The Assassins were masters of espionage, disguise, and precise eliminations. They and the Templars were like mirror images of one another. Two secret orders, operating in the same land, both possessed unique knowledge and craved power. Chronicles are filled with tales of their conflicts, but there are also whispers of secret contact. Could the two most formidable intelligence networks of the Middle Ages have done more than fight? Could they have exchanged knowledge? Perhaps some of the secrets uncovered by the Templars were not Jewish, but Persian or Arabic in origin, acquired through perilous negotiations with the Old Man of the Mountain. Did they find it? Most likely not. But that they found something of immense importance, there can be no doubt. After 9 years of digging beneath the Temple Mount, they returned to Europe. And then a miracle occurred. A poor order suddenly became impossibly wealthy. Within just a few decades, the Templars transformed into the most powerful transnational corporation of the Middle Ages. They became the bankers of kings and popes, owned vast lands across Europe, and their fleet dominated trade in the Mediterranean. They invented the banking check and created the first global financial network. Where did such sudden wealth and influence come from? The official version claims donations and clever financial deals. But that is not enough to explain such a meteoric rise. The alternative version is far more convincing. They had not found gold, they had found knowledge. Perhaps not the ring itself, but fragments of Solomon's archive, texts on economics, governance, logistics, centuries ahead of their time. Or, more dangerously still, descriptions of techniques of manipulation, once whispered by enslaved spirits. They did not summon demons. They used their principles to build an empire. Their power grew so vast it threatened kings and rulers alike. And then the system broke. The French king, Philip the Fair, drowning in debt to the Templars, resolved to destroy his creditor. He conspired with Pope Clement V. On Friday, October 13, 1307, the largest police operation in history began. Every Templar in France was arrested. They were accused of heresy, idolatry, sodomy, and worshipping a mysterious head called Baphomet. Under torture, they confessed to everything. They were burned at the stake, the order dissolved, its wealth confiscated. But Philip never obtained the one thing he truly sought. He found neither the Templars' legendary treasure, spirited away before the arrests, nor their ultimate secret. The knowledge they unearthed beneath the temple vanished underground once again. It did not die. It was preserved by the few who escaped. The story of the Templars is the story of a corporation that tapped into dangerous knowledge, rose to the heavens, and was brutally crushed by rivals hungry for its secrets. The flames that consumed the knights did not consume the idea. They tempered it. They made it more mysterious, more coveted. It lay hidden, waiting to be reborn in a new age, an age when books became more accessible, and the hunger for knowledge proved stronger than the fear of the Inquisition's fire. The fire of the Inquisitors destroyed the Templars, but not their greatest secret. The idea that there exists knowledge granting power over the invisible world went into hiding. And it waited until its time came. The Renaissance. Europe awakened from a 1,000-year sleep. The printing press made books available to all. Humanists unearthed ancient manuscripts. Scholars challenged the dogmas of the Church. It was the age of titans of thought, of artists and explorers. And naturally, this surge of interest in antiquity did not pass over its most forbidden part, the legacy of Solomon. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Europe was swept by a wave of fascination with magic and the occult. But this was not mere superstition. The thinkers of the era, from Marsilio Ficino and Pico della Mirandola to Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa and the famed John Dee, advisor to Queen Elizabeth of England, saw in it not magic, but prototience. They believed the universe was a vast mechanism governed by sympathies and antipathies, and that by knowing the right formulas, one could influence reality itself. It was during this period that the most famous grimoires attributed to Solomon appeared and spread. The Key of Solomon and the Lemegeton, or the Lesser Key of Solomon. These were not just retellings of legends, but practical manuals. They detailed the tools, pentagrams, incantations, the time and place for rituals, and above all, the names, seals, and powers of 72 demons. For the scholars of the Renaissance, this was a challenge. They sought not only to translate the texts, but to activate them. They treated the summoning of spirits not as superstition, but as a dangerous, exhilarating experiment. They sought not wealth or power, but knowledge. They longed to speak with those they believed held the secrets of the universe. But this pursuit led to tragedies. Europe whispered with tales of scholars driven mad in their laboratories, of mysterious fires that consumed entire libraries, of strange deaths of those who went too far. The ring was no longer a physical object. It had become an idea, a perilous formula anyone could attempt to recreate. And each attempt was like a game of Russian roulette with invisible forces. One of the brightest yet darkest examples was Gilles de Rais, Marshal of France, comrade of Joan of Arc, hero of the 100 Years' War, and one of the richest aristocrats of his age. After the war, he withdrew into his castles, delving into alchemy and occultism in a desperate quest to regain lost wealth. His experiments, based on texts believed to be variations of the Key of Solomon, quickly spiraled into horror. Gilles de Rais and his accomplices, according to trial testimony, began summoning demons, one called Baron among them, offering him anything he desired in exchange for knowledge and gold. When the demons demanded sacrifices, Gilles began abducting and murdering hundreds of children from nearby villages. His story is no legend, it is a documented fact. His trial in 1440 revealed terrifying details that shocked all of Europe. He became the living embodiment of the ring's curse. A man who had everything, fame, wealth, power, sought more through forbidden knowledge and became one of history's most monstrous serial killers. The Church could not ignore such a threat. The Inquisition, once focused mostly on heretics, turned its attention to sorcerers. A systematic hunt for grimoires began. Possession of the Key of Solomon became a death sentence. Books were burned at the stake along with their owners. A true thriller unfolded in universities, monastic libraries, and secret laboratories across Europe. Inquisitors tracked forbidden books, set ambushes, interrogated printers and bookbinders. Yet the more books they burned, the more appeared. The ban only fueled the obsession. Grimoires were copied by hand, hidden in double walls, passed down through generations. The bright ideals of the Renaissance collided with a dark, uncontrollable force. It was a war of ideas. A war between rational inquiry and mystical revelation, between dogma and freedom of thought taken too far. And in this war, the Inquisition lost. They could burn a man, but they could not burn an idea. The idea of Solomon's ring, the idea of power through knowledge, survived. It passed through fire and emerged stronger. Grimoires, tempered in fire, became more than books. They became symbols of resistance, keys to a forbidden world. And they waited for their time, when science would take the next step and attempt to explain their formulas in its own new language. But what was more dangerous in that era? The text itself, with its perilous formulas, or the human being whose pride and thirst for knowledge drove him to ignore every warning? Reflect on this and share your choice in the comments. Code word book, if you believe the danger lies in knowledge itself. Or reader, if you believe any tool is harmless, until it falls into the wrong hands. Centuries passed. The Age of Enlightenment. The Industrial Revolution. The 20th century with its world wars and scientific breakthroughs. One would think that in this rational new world there was no longer room for tales of magic rings and demons. But that was only on the surface. The legend of Solomon's ring did not die. It simply changed form. From secret grimoires, it moved onto the pages of novels, onto cinema screens, into the digital realm. The ring itself was never found. No archaeological expedition ever proved its existence. But the idea, that immaterial essence, proved immortal. It lives on in our culture, in our ambitions, in our fears. Today, the grimoires of Solomon are no longer rare manuscripts, but bestsellers on the darknet and shelves of occult bookstores. Their texts are digitized, analyzed, freely available. Anyone with internet access can download the instructions for summoning the 72 demons. It looks like a harmless game, a piece of pop culture. But is it really? Look at our modern world through the prism of this ancient legend. Solomon once used spirits to gather information. And what do we use today? Today we call it intelligence gathering, data analysis, artificial intelligence. Corporations and governments know more about us than we know about ourselves. They know what we buy, what we fear, how we vote. They shape our opinions not with spells, but with algorithms. Legend says Solomon could command spirits to take any form and deceive people. Today, we call this deepfakes. Technology can create a perfect copy of anyone, make them speak and act in ways they never did. A weapon capable of destroying reputations, igniting wars, sowing chaos and distrust. We have unleashed thousands of digital genies. We call them neural networks, artificial intelligence. These are our new servants. They write our texts, paint our pictures, drive our cars, execute our commands. They grant us power humanity has never held before. But do we truly control them? Do we even understand how they work? Will the day come when our servant, like Asmodeus once did, decides he is wiser than his master and casts us out of our own world? Perhaps Solomon's ring never existed as an artifact. Perhaps it was always a metaphor. A metaphor for humanity's eternal temptation. The hunger for absolute power through knowledge. The desire to become God, to control everything. This drive is embedded in our DNA. It fueled progress, forged empires, inspired discoveries. Yet it has also caused our darkest catastrophes. Every man who tried to wear this imagined ring, from emperors to dictators of the 20th century, was doomed. They either went mad under the weight of power, or perished, collapsing the world around them. The story of the ring is a warning that there are realms of knowledge and technology humanity is simply not ready to control. Any attempt to seize such power unleashes destructive forces, not outside, but within ourselves. That is the true curse of Solomon's ring. Not magic, but man. The legend has not ended. It unfolds right now, before our eyes. And each of us is already part of it. History confronts us with the same question it once placed before Solomon. If today you were offered such a ring, absolute control over the global network, complete access to all knowledge, and the power to command information, but with the risk that one mistake, one moment of pride, could bring civilization to ruin, would you dare to wear it? Write in the comments. Lord, I trust in your timing. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Help us reach our first milestone of 500 subscribers.